Hi, everyone. This is Phil from Freckle Education. Thank you so much for joining us. I am ridiculously excited to be talking about Freckle Science and social studies. Um, Probably because, and I know I shouldn't pick favorites, but these are probably my two favorite subjects within kind of the Freckle ecosystem, and I'm excited to share with you kind of why that is the case. My goal for the next kind of 30 minutes is to give you a nice quick overview of Freckle Science and social studies so that you kind of know everything that you need to know to jump in and get started. So we're not going to cover every single detail. That would take a little bit longer than 30 minutes. But I am going to give you everything that you need to know to get started. But first, just a little bit about me, and I promise to keep this short because I know you're here for the content and not here for Phil, as it should be. But as I said earlier, my name's Phil. I'm on the team here at Freckle Education. And I actually used to be a fifth grade teacher, which is not unusual here at Freckle. Most of us are former teachers. But I feel like that is why I feel so connected to Freckle Science and social studies, and I'll share some of my stories along the way, but in particular, I think why I'm interested in Freckle Science is way back when I was in college, I actually studied molecular and cell biology of all things. And at that time, I thought that I was going to be an actual scientist as my life and my career. And certainly it's taken a turn since then, but science has always been something that I've been really passionate about. And so as we were building Freckle Science about a year ago, I was really interested, and now I'm just excited to see how much teachers love it and how much it's helping their students. But anyway, that's a big aside. The main reason I wanted you to see this slide here today is so that you would have my email address, which is there at the bottom. It's phil@freckle.com. So really easy to remember, hopefully. We also have a great support team. They're just support@freckle.com. But I just wanted you to have my email address in case any questions come up. Just send me an email. I would love to help. We're also going to take time at the end today to answer any questions that might come up. But if you're anything like me, I know you're probably going to come up with your best questions, in a few days or maybe even in a month. And if that's the case, send me an email, and I would genuinely love to help. So we're going to start off today by talking about Freckle Science, which gets me really excited. And when we were building Freckle Science, really what we wanted to do is make it something so that it was engaging, hands-on units that your students are going to love. So we firmly believe here at Freckle that science was never meant to be something that your students just practice. That is the boringest way to teach science, and that's in my humble opinion. And I think back to my background, and when I was in elementary school as a student, I always loved science. That was probably the most fun time. And then as I got further and further in learning science, at some point, maybe it's in high school or maybe it's in college, it does become a little bit about practice. And I think we risk kind of losing some of the joy of science when we do that, because we believe that really science is about asking great questions. It's about taking guesses. It's about creating experiments. And it's really about kind of being delighted and curious and skeptical about what you find. In a lot of ways, when we're teaching students science, and this goes if you're teaching them science through Freckle or if you're just teaching them in general, what we're doing is we're showing students how to love learning, and we're preparing them for their futures, I think, in ways that is even more powerful than other subjects. And I feel really strongly about this, which I hope is coming across. And kind of at the foundation of science is, we're creating hypotheses, we're thinking about what might happen, we're testing those things, and then we're thinking about, okay, I have this hypothesis, it did or didn't happen, what does that mean? I feel like that's a really, really important life skill, just as we're teaching our students critical thinking. And it's these skills that are going to kind of transcend subjects. And I think help them throughout the rest of their lives. So going back to about a year ago, or maybe it was a year and a half ago, when we started working on Freckle Science, we really wanted to make a world-class engaging program. And obviously, in order to do this, just like we do with all things at Freckle, we turn to the experts who are teachers in the classroom, such as yourself. And through our conversations with these teachers, there were three main themes that stood out for what was essential for science. So first is the program had to be hands-on. Again, like I mentioned earlier, science was never meant to be something that was just practiced with pencil and paper, or just practiced on the computer for that matter. Science is learned by doing. And with science, it's sometimes hard for students to see how the material is relevant for them. So we knew that our program had to really engage students, not just teaching them facts, but really immersing them in these science and engineering practices. The next thing that we heard from teachers is that a world-class science program had to be thought-provoking. Because again, remember when I mentioned earlier, we really believe that science is all about asking great questions. So you'll see when your students are using Freckle Science, we have articles and inquiry-based activities that are all relevant and engaging and designed in such a way that they're leaving students asking why. At least that's our intent. And that's why we call our activities, we call them activities and we call them explorations, because we want to give students a chance to be curious about the world and uncover something new. And then lastly, the thing that we heard from teachers, and this would probably be no surprise to any of us listening in today, is it had to be time saving. Teachers already spend, on average about 20 hours a week working outside of the classroom. And for many teachers, and this is myself included when I was in the classroom, kind of science is often the last thing on our mind. It's probably the one thing we most want to teach, but just with so many pressures, it oftentimes is the thing that we dedicate the least amount of time to. So when we were creating Freckle Science, we had it in mind we needed to create really engaging, hands-on, thought-provoking units that a teacher could prep for in about 5 to 10 minutes without sacrificing any of the quality. So that's what we were shooting for. And now I guess you get to hold me to it all now, because we're gonna actually jump in and do a Freckle Science walkthrough together. So let me get out of this presentation and I'm gonna log into my Freckle account and we're gonna look at Freckle Science together. So here we go. I dragged that over. You should be seeing my screen now, and I'm logged into Freckle as a demo teacher. So in order to access our science units, you'll come over here and look on the left-hand side of your screen, scroll down to science, and then you'll see our units here. And so you'll see that we have, I'm going to scroll pretty slowly here. You'll see that we have a wide variety of units here available for you as a teacher. And we'll dig in and look at these in depth. But I just want you to see kind of the broad spectrum of science units that are available for you. As you can see, they cover all sorts of grades. So what is matter is grades K through 2, structure and properties of matter is grades 3 through 5, Earth's history and geoprocesses is grades 6 through 8, etc. Kind of scroll through here, just give you a chance to kind of see these. And hopefully when you log in to your own account, and now you know where to find these, just go to science and units and you can browse these too. And I will say these grade ranges that we show you here, these are just our kind of suggestions. So for example, if you want to teach your 5th graders about human body systems, open up this unit, take a look. If the material looks great to you, then perfect, go ahead and use it. This is just our recommendations. The other thing, if I scroll up to the top of the screen that I want you to see here, is that all of these units are NGSS aligned, which we heard was really important to teachers. And you can see the NGSS alignment at a glance here on the main screen. Okay, but let's do this. Let's jump into the forces in motion unit. And I just want to give you an overview of how these are structured, because all of these units are structured in the same way. So we start out by kind of giving you, the teacher, general materials. So throughout our science units, you're going to see that there's a lot of, as we talked about, hands-on engaging activities. And for some of those activities, you're going to need some materials. And all the materials that you're going to need are kind of household around the classroom materials. We knew that we weren't going to make you go buy a microscope or anything like that. But here's where you can look at the materials list. You can open it up. And this is where you'll do most of the prep for the entire unit. So we show you everything that you need to run all of the lessons for this unit. And then you'll see the unit is broken down into different lessons. Again, there's no need to go lesson by lesson. Feel free to go through here and pick and choose and use the lessons that make the most sense for you and your students. But here in Forces in Motion, you'll see we start off with an introduction unit where we have a video that you can show to your students. We have an article about Sir Isaac Newton, and then we have an activity about curiosity. And all of this here is stuff that you will prep and kind of deliver to your students, and most of it is going to happen off the computer. So if you're used to using Freckle for math or ELA, you know that your students are really on there kind of practicing on their own for the most part. As we talked about, science is really different for us. So what we'll do is with our activity here around curiosity, for example, you'll see that this activity starts with the teacher guide here on the first page, or in this case, it looks like, yeah, it's the first page. And then here we have worksheets for you and your students that you would print out and hand out for them. But all of the directions for you as a teacher are going to be here on the teacher guide. You'll also see that here when you assign articles to your students, it's automatically going to assign all of your students the article at their reading level. For most of you who have used Freckle before, you're aware of that. But if you're coming in for the first time just checking out science, it's probably one of the most powerful things about Freckle. So for example, I can assign this article about Sir Isaac Newton. Click Assign. And you'll see here, let me just scroll down a little bit and choose some of my students. Every student is going to get this article at the level that's best for them. So Millard is getting it at a grade 2.7 level. Ella is getting it at a grade 3.9. Warren, wow, he's reading at a 7th grade level. So your students can kind of access the material and understand the concepts because they're going to be reading it automatically at their level. Okay, so let's go back to our unit here. A few more things I want to show you here before we jump to social studies. So you'll see that there are a bulk of lessons here, and then I want to show you something really special kind of at the end of all of these units. We can get all the way to the end. Maybe I should go a little bit more slowly so you can just kind of browse everything that's going on here. There's a lot of material available for you. So here we go. So at the end, there's always a design engineering challenge, which is a ton of fun. And we always get a kick when teachers kind of record their students doing these and sending them our way. It's always a lot of fun. This one is probably my personal favorite because this unit was all about forces in motion. So the design engineering challenge is for students to make a Rube Goldberg machine. And so it starts by kind of showing your students a video. You won't be able to hear this, but at least let you see a little bit of it. So that's what a Rube Goldberg machine is. For those of you that don't know, it's one of those things where it's kind of a chain reaction of things that you have physical items do that does something for you. So in movies, a lot of times it's these Rube Goldberg machines for making breakfast for people and that sort of thing. So that's introducing the idea to your students. Then you can assign an article to them about Rube Goldberg machines, which they'll read at their level. And then they actually get the activity. And they have this design engineering challenge where they get to make their own. And there are a few things about this that I really love. We can scroll through here. So that's the teacher instructions. And here's the part that I love. So on day one, it says, students should first determine the task they would like the machine to complete. press a button, open a door, put toast in a toaster, and outline a design on the final project handout. Then have students consider available supplies and submit an application for a grant for any supplies they will need for their machine. The grant application is included with the final project handout. Then the teacher gets to review and approve students' grant applications and distribute grants once there are no more edits to be made. That just sounds like so much fun to me. And then if we scroll down, you'll see kind of the handouts for the students. So here's where they design and sketch and label their proposed machine. Here's their grant application and whether or not it's approved. So these units are really fun and engaging for your students. And then down here at the end, for those of you that want them, there are also unit assessments for each of these science units. Okay, a few questions that commonly come up around Freckle Science, which I know might be on your mind even before we get to questions, is kind of what of this is available in the free teacher edition and what is available in the premium school edition. And for those of you that don't know, we have two versions of Freckle. One is free, and it's going to be free for teachers for forever. And the other is our premium kind of school edition, which is really designed for schools and districts to upgrade all of their teachers to. So with Freckle Science, and actually this goes for Freckle Social Studies too, you'll have access to a lot of the lessons and a lot of the activities, but not all of them. And you'll be able to see, so log into your account and you'll see some of these will be grayed out if you don't have access to them on the free edition. There's gonna be tons of here available for you on the free edition. So don't let that dissuade you. If you're on free, check this out, you're gonna love it. The only thing to know is if you upgrade to school edition, you get all of this unlocked, which is pretty neat. Okay, so that is Freckle Science. Now we're gonna jump to Freckle Social Studies. So let me pull up our presentation here. Or actually, I'm getting ahead of myself because there are a few more things on Freckle Science I wanted to show you. And this I'm always a little bit bashful about, but I did want to show some teacher testimonials so you can believe folks other than me that this is really neat and working in their classroom. So this fourth grade teacher, and these came from teachers that we actually had pilot science before we even launched it, says it was hands-on, included authentic texts, and required deep thought on the part of the students. It was well designed and all students were hooked and engaged throughout. Okay, so now we're gonna jump to Freckle Social Studies. And Freckle Social Studies is near and dear to me because one of my most vivid memories when I was teaching fifth grade is actually when I was teaching the American Revolutionary War, mainly because I was teaching the American Revolutionary War out of some really old rundown textbooks, which I know is not a surprise and I'm sure is kind of similar to the situation that many of you are in. But all of those textbooks were written at a fifth grade level. The only problem with that is that many of my students, I would in fact say most of my students, were not at a fifth grade level. And I had a fair number of students that were still reading at a first grade level. And of course, as you would expect, on the flip side, I had students that were reading novels that were more difficult than I would want to read, students that were reading at high school level. And I always felt really bad because when I was teaching social studies, those students that were reading at a first grade level just couldn't access the material. And it had nothing to do with their interest in the material or their desire to learn social studies. Instead, it was just, they just couldn't read it. And so I would have to spend time, not have to, I would spend time with them after school and before school and try to just get them caught up. And I would try to plan activities that were, really fun and engaging and didn't require a lot of reading. But still, I mean, a lot of it was from the textbook and those students couldn't access it. And I always felt terrible about it. And it was one of kind of, like I said, my most vivid memories from teaching. And that's why I get excited about Freckle Social Studies, because that entire problem just goes away. Just like what we were talking about with Freckle Science. With Freckle Social Studies, you can teach a unit like the American Revolutionary War, and all of your students can read that unit or read those articles that are in that unit at their level. So when I think back to my students, the students that were reading at a first grade level, they could read about the American Revolutionary War, but just get the text at a first grade level. And so they wouldn't be left behind with the rest of their class. And so that's why I love this so much. And I want to kind of show it to you quickly here. So let me exit out of here. And we're going to go back to our teacher dashboard. And you probably already know where to see this by now, but to get to Freckle Social Studies, come here on the left, choose subjects, choose social studies, and you'll see all of our units that are available here. And there are a lot of them. Just like you saw with science, you can see the grade ranges here. So it covers all the way from K to 12. And also, just like I said for science, use these grades as kind of a guide, but choose to ignore them if you want. In fact, I mean, that's probably what I would have done as a teacher, especially if like types of government, when I taught 5th grade, I would take a look in here, and I bet that that would have worked for a lot of my students too. But the unit that I wanted to show you is the American Revolutionary War, because that was not a made up example that I told you earlier. That was a very real example for me. And I know that we have a unit in here that I would have loved. So here's the American Revolutionary War unit, and let's go and check it out. And you're gonna see the structure here is very similar to what we saw in science. In fact, it is identical. We start off with the general kind of materials for the teachers, and then we bump down into the different lessons. And again, this is all gonna be teacher-led. So there's a video you can play for your class. There's resources you can print out ahead of time. There are articles that you can assign to your students and they'll get at their level. There are discussion questions which you can use to lead discussion around them. And then as we get to the bottom, it's a lot here. I'm so jealous. I wish that I had this when I was in the classroom. Here we go. Can I ever get to the bottom? There we go. We made it. So in the conclusion, you'll see that there's always a unit exam, a concluding video, there's essay prompts, but most exciting to me is there's a final project, which is something that I always really love to incorporate in my social studies units. But now that you've seen kind of a snapshot of it, I want to scroll up to the top. Because when we were making Freckle Social Studies, one of the things that was really important for us is we recognized that social studies is a great time to teach our students about empathy and to really have them be in other people's shoes and experience history kind of firsthand that way, as opposed to just kind of reading about it from their own viewpoint. And so you'll notice in a lot of our units, we really build that in. And in fact, this is probably one of my favorite ones. If we go here, you'll see that there's an activity here where students get to choose their own character. So you see there are 8 different character profiles. You can print them out for your students and you can either assign them or they can choose. And here you'll see that your students are going to go through the rest of this unit acting as if they were one of these characters, which is pretty neat. So there's a few different colonist profiles. There's a slave profile, a Cherokee, parliament member, etc. And so what your students will do is they will take on that role throughout the unit, and then even throughout that kind of role follows them throughout the multiple lessons here. So for example, when we're talking about the French and Indian War, there's an activity where your students will get to describe how their specific character would have reacted to that. And they get to write a Facebook update as if they were that character, and then they get to find a partner in the class to write a response about how their character would reply. So it's all engaging kind of hands-on stuff, just like on the science side, and all of your students can access it at their level. Kind of scroll through here a little bit. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of Freckle Social Studies there. Just like with science, the difference between the free edition and the school edition is on the school edition, you get unlimited access to the entire unit. And on the free teacher edition, you'll see that some of these are grayed out. And the best way to know, it's different for every unit. So just hop in and see what's available for free and what isn't. And then of course we've had teachers using this for a few years now too. And I pulled out just a few quotes from the Revolutionary War unit, because again, that's near and dear to my heart. So Kim says, I've been using the Revolutionary War unit and my kids are getting so much out of it. It really gives them such a great connection with history. And Chelsea says, I loved the Revolutionary War unit so much. My kiddos loved it too and got so much out of it. So that was probably the world's fastest overview of Freckle Science and Social Studies, but I hope that you kind of saw the different areas and saw how passionate we are about it, because we are ridiculously passionate about these two things. And if you have any questions, keep in mind we're going to hop to a Q&A right now. But if you have any questions later, again, my email address is phil@freckle.com, and I would really, really love to help. All of us here are just so thankful for all of the great work that you do to really provide an outstanding education for your students, and anything that we can ever do to help you, we are more than willing to do. So please don't be bashful about reaching out. But with that, let me turn it over to you and let's see what questions we have. And in the meantime, I'm going to mute myself, take a drink of water, let some of those questions come in, and then we'll get going. All right, so I'm seeing a few questions here about kind of how to assign those social studies articles to make sure that students get them at the right level. So I'll show you that. So here we're at Freckle Social Studies again. We're at one of these units, and let's just try to assign this article about the Boston Massacre. So we just hit this button. You can preview the article. You can preview all the different levels. But for this case, we're just going to hit assign. Can you choose to assign reading or writing? Here's where kind of the magic happens. If you wanted, you could assign all of your students the 7th grade version of this article, and basically it would be a textbook. But I always love to keep it set at that adaptive level, and that's what ensures that every student gets it at their level. Then you choose your students, and as you can see, Freckle automatically knows what level students should be reading at. And the reason why we know that is because the first time your students go to read an article, we automatically start them off with a pre-test to determine the right reading level for them. And then we continuously adjust over time. But if for any reason you disagree with these, it's really easy to change that too. So maybe you know that Neil should actually be getting a 5th grade version. You could just change it. Come down here to the bottom, hit assign, and it's as easy as that. Great. Okay, I'm also seeing a few questions about kind of the grade levels of social studies and science and where I was seeing that. So let me point that out again. And again, these are only our recommendations, but they're right here on the main unit screen. So you can see immigration is probably good for grades 4 through 10. Protesting for change is probably good for grades 6 through 12. And then same here over on science. You can see the grade levels here, and you can see the NGSS alignment here. Okay, and then I'm seeing a few questions about kind of the difference between free edition and school edition. And we touched on that midway through, but I'll give a quick kind of summary again. So we have a free teacher edition, which is going to be free for forever. I know that sometimes I get that question. It's not a limited time free trial or anything like that. It's free forever. And you have access to many of the activities within the unit. But for ones that you don't have access to, you'll see that the button will be grayed out. On the premium school edition, you'll have access to all of the units and all of the activities within the units. What I would recommend doing is if you're on our free teacher edition, keep using it. If you love it, get a few of the other teachers in your school on board. And once you have a few teachers on board, that's when it makes sense to upgrade to the school edition, chat with the principal about that. And I think you'll get a lot out of it. But if you're starting with the free edition, then that's a good place to start too. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Again, if you ever have any questions, please just send me an email, phil@freckle.com, and enjoy the rest of your day. All right, thanks everyone.